So I see myself having had sort of five different stages of growth: schooling, a brief flirtation with engineering, marketing, Econ Zenda, and now philanthropy. What gave me a lot of joy was seeing how Indian companies transform themselves from being family run to being a diverse group of family run and non family run professionals. It's not just the individual that will make it successful, it's the ecosystem around him or her that makes them successful. I've never felt the word giving back is the right term in philanthropy. I think it's giving forward. It's just that I think there's so much creativity, so much beauty, so much diversity that women can bring into our lives. But I'm not sure we as men allow it as much. You can give food to somebody and satisfy them, but if there's no derivative benefit beyond that, what's the theory of change?
Good evening and welcome to yet another edition of Thinkly Talks. We are in conversation with Govind Iyer. Govind is an independent director at Infosys, a senior advisor at Warburg Pincus. Prior to this, Govind worked at Egon Zehnder, P&G, Coca-Cola, and Heinz. Govind has been very actively involved with several NGOs in various capacities, such as the Asian Venture Philanthropy Network, Give India, Living My Promise, and he is a founding member and chairperson now of Social Venture Partners in India. Govindan has a Bachelor of Engineering degree from REC Trichy, an MBA from the Wharton School, of which he's still very actively, part of as an alumnus. And, he's really been passionate really about philanthropy. So with that, Govind, welcome to Thinkly. Great to have you here.
Thank you very much, Vivek. My pleasure and privilege to be part of this.
So Govind, I mean, looking at your career and, you've spent so much time in FMCG, you've really been in search and in other areas, there's just a lot to unpack with you. I mean, I think a good starting point, Govind, would be maybe you just kind of walking us through your life story about how did you kind of make the choices that, kind of came about?
Very quickly, if I had to encapsulate my many years of my life, it's five journeys. The first was my schooling. I was very privileged to be in a family, my parents who gave me a lot of opportunities to learn and grow. I was in Ahmedabad, that's where I did my schooling. I did a lot of work in the social sector then as well, more as a volunteer in school. And then wasn't great in academics, I must admit. Didn't do as well as I should have. But I think reality hit me when I didn't do it that well. And in college, I did very well. And thereafter, my journey in education really took off. So my first phase was my education. My second phase was a brief flirtation with engineering. I did my mechanical engineering, worked for a few years, but realized that I won't be a best engineer in the world. So I moved to do an MBA. And then I spent 11 years in marketing, which was a fantastic journey for me, learning from some of the best in Procter& and Gamble and learning about the Indian consumer. Then I moved to my last phase before in the corporate world, which is with Egon Zehnder, where I was for about 23 and a half years. Uh, been very privileged to lead a number of different sectors, whether it's the industrial sector, the technology sector, the private equity sector, doing a lot of work at the board level. And around 15 years ago, I decided it's time I started doing something in the philanthropy space. And that's when I started my journey in philanthropy, which has continued. And now my purpose in life over the next 10, 15 years is really in the philanthropy space. So I see myself having had sort of 5 years, five different stages of growth: schooling, a brief flirtation with engineering, marketing, Econ Zenda, and now philanthropy.
And when you look at your career, especially after spending so many years with FMCG companies like Coke, like P&G and all, what really prompted you to kind of move to Egon Zehnder?
That's a very momentous moment for me in my life. I think it was one of the best decisions I've taken in joining an outstanding firm called Egon Zehnder. Very difficult decision, very, very difficult decision. Many of my friends and family said, don't do it because Egon Zehnder was unknown in India at that point. We were the first international firm to enter the country. I had a great career going in marketing. I was moving to a very different industry. Those days, what we call the placement agencies or the search firms weren't as evolved as they are today. So it was a new sector. But I felt at this point of time that it was the best time to take risk and become a bit of an entrepreneur because I was one of the first few to join the Egon Zehnder team. I was the fourth consultant, the first in Mumbai. And what was amazing for me was the culture of the firm. So Vivek, I didn't join to do search. I joined a firm to embrace the culture. And what's kept me there for 23 and a half years was the culture. The work was outstanding. The relationships and the people I met were fabulous. But I think it's the firm that really made the difference to my journey in life.
And could you kind of just walk us through some of the interesting, especially when you look at CEO succession, when you look at board level governance, right? And I think you kind of focused a lot also on the family run businesses, right?
Yeah.
Any insight and thoughts that you have about your time with them?
So, if I go back to Econ Center when I started working there, a large portion of our client base used to be multinationals because the Indian clients had not yet reached the stage of hiring a lot from outside. When I left the firm, I would say between 60 and 70% of our work was largely Indian family businesses. So it was a
Fascinating.
pivotal, a significant pivotal switch in the way our client profile changed. What gave me a lot of joy is actually working with Indian clients because you could see the impact happening. With multinational clients, India made up between 2 and 10% of their business. It wasn't the most significant part, but it was a very rewarding journey of looking at the professionals I worked with in the multinational world. But I think what gave me a lot of joy was seeing how Indian companies transform themselves from being family run to being a diverse group of family run and non family run professionals. And I think that was very, very exciting, challenging, very, very challenging, but very exciting because it involved changing the mindsets of a lot of people to be able to hire individuals who may not have been like them, but may have had a very different journey of life and were not part of their family. So I enjoyed that Vivek the most, and it wasn't just CEO succession; it was building the whole team. It also involved a lot of spending time with the founders and spending time with the board to educate them on this journey. So those were some of the things that gave me a lot of joy.
I think as we see the Indian businesses kind of grow and kind of really expand the footprint on the globe right now, I think people like you would have would have found it extremely rewarding, just kind of working closely with them and seeing all of this happen. I think because at the end of it all, it finally just comes down to people.
Yeah, it does. It does. And it's not, you talked of CEO succession earlier, right? CEO succession is a very complex process. And I think it's very important to recognize that it's not just the individual that will make it successful, it's the ecosystem around him or her that
Right.
makes them successful. And
Right.
so, whether it's the board, whether it's the founding family, whether it's the team below, it's very important for us as a firm, as Egon Zender, to play an important role beyond the appointment. Many
Right.
people believe that the search firm role ends at the appointment. To my mind,
Yeah.
actually, the work begins then. Because over the next 12 to 18 months, you've really got to make the person successful in the role. And I think that's what gave me a lot of joy. And Egon Zender allowed me to do that because the model of Egon Zender was very strongly based on relationship building versus transaction or just closing an assignment. It was more measured more by at the end of 18 months, is the individual and the family or the company we've hired them for, whether it's a multinational firm, a Pepsi, a Coke, a Microsoft, are they happy? So for me, I remember on a small a lighter moment. I remember calling up the CEO of a private equity firm who was I just appointed a CEO in India, and I called up a managing director in London and said, you gave me this mandate and I hired this person. How's he doing? So he said, why do you ask? So I said, no, I like to check in at the 3 months, 6 month stage. He says, is there a money back guarantee? Because, is that the reason you're calling? I said, no, I just want to make sure he's successful. And no, he was joking, but he's been in the role for 12 years. So still is in the role. So I think it's just the culture of the firm that says, don't look at closing an assignment as being the end state. Look at seeing the person happy after 18, 24 months as being the end state.
So I think with this, would love to kind of shift gears a bit and move to, your other passion, one of your 5 important phases of your life, which has been really philanthropy. And I think you kind of got involved somewhere around 2010 or 12 in this in a big way, or in a structured format, so to say, right? So tell us about your journey when you became a founding member of SVP, and now, of course, you're the chairperson. But what attracted you to this space? And I would say pretty early in your career, right? It's not like you're retired or whatever. You were still right in the thick of things. So walk us through that.
Couple of things. One is it's quite coincidental, or it's quite as if the stars had aligned. But I was at a retreat with a bunch of friends, and I was thinking about my next 10 years. So our moderator there had asked us to, in a small envelope, write down, if we open this envelope 10 years later, what would it have that you've achieved? And
Nice.
in my own way, I had put down saying, I've had a fantastic journey at Egon Zender over the last 12, 13 years. Next 10 years, I will be at Egon Zender, but what else can I do? And in that, I had mentioned that I've had the good fortune of building a lot of good relationships through my work. How can I use the relationships I've developed to get them more engaged with doing good for people that, making the world a lot more equal, and doing good for people that may not have the same privileges as us. And it's not just financial privileges, it's also knowledge, it's also experience, it's also wisdom. And I kind of wrote it down without knowing how the hell I'm going to do it. And you won't believe it, Vivek, but literally within 2 hours, I get a call from a gentleman called Ravi Venkatesan, who's used to be the chairman of Microsoft, and he just retired.
Yeah.
And he talked to me about Social Venture Partners, a movement that he wanted to start in India. And he said, "Would you join as one of my founding board members?" And I said, "Sure." It just kind of felt right. And I decided to join. And it's been the most amazing 12 years of my life with SVP. But beyond SVP, I'm now engaged with 9 different organizations, all in the not for profit space, that are doing some amazing work in different ways. So to me, this was the seed. And, it's grown to be a bit of like a farm for me in terms of many things that I'm doing. So I joined SVP because of only one reason. Um, I felt here was something that was new, untested, but provided a great platform and a community for people like me and many like me to get engaged in philanthropy. I love the way SVP was conceived in the US in the 90s, and I saw their model, and I felt this is the kind of model that will make a huge difference to India. And that's what led me to say, okay, let me get onto this bandwagon and see where it goes. And I remember Ravi and I in the first year said, let's get to 1,000 partners. When and how, we don't know. We should hopefully close on that goal in 24 months from now. Okay, and that'll give me a lot of joy once we hit that milestone, because it's not about a numerical milestone. It's about the fact that we've got 1,000 people and 1,000 families now engaged in their way of philanthropy in the marketplace in India. And that's a multiplier of facts, because those 1,000 people will do a lot of good work outside of SVP as well.
1,000 partner. That sounds like a typical Ravi, kind of a goal, right? Just think back.
Yeah.
But you've written a lot in some of the posts about engage philanthropy, and I think an SVP, I believe stands for that. So it's really about going beyond just financial support and really kind of offering your skills, co-creating with your partners, and kind of helping them out there. Could you just help the audience out here really understand a little bit about this? Because philanthropy for us is really about people writing checks in the layman term, right? So would love your voice, your.
I think firstly, writing a check and giving some money is a very good idea. I don't think we should, however, give it with charity in mind, because charity, by definition, means we're not respecting the other person as much as we're giving it to them. So I think philanthropy through respect is the first thing, and writing a check is a damn good idea. There's no harm in that. However, I think if you engage with the money you give, the value to you will be very high, because you actually see what's happening with the programs on the ground. And most importantly, Vivek, you feel a certain sense of happiness and satisfaction in your soul that you have learned a lot and yet you've given a lot. So however, have never felt the word giving back is the right term in philanthropy. I think it's
Right.
giving forward. You're giving forward to make the lives of somebody else better, to make a system better, to drive systemic change. So I think if we can move the needle over time of philanthropy is not giving back, giving forward to really driving change, I think that will be a much better way of looking at a positive orientation of philanthropy. Your question about what does SVP do in engage philanthropy? It's really a model where we all, 700 of us now across India in 8 cities, we get together as a group, collectively look at in each city, look at how are the not-for-profits we can work with, which ones are they, identify them, spend about 6 weeks getting to know them really well, and then choose to give some financial capital to them, but also promise them that with the financial capital comes time, comes wisdom, comes experience, and some intervention. So, I've had the good fortune of working with a lot of not-for-profits in the SVP ecosystem, and my partners are doing that, where we've pivoted some of their journeys. We've got them to recognize how they can do much better by doing A, B, or C, and basically bringing our experience. And Vivek, I want to call it out. It's not just corporate experience. We have a lot of partners who've never worked in the workforce, but do some amazing work with our not-for-profits. So I just want to clarify that SVP is not for the corporate honchos or the corporate bigwigs. It's for every human being in the country. Because every one of us has common sense, every one of us has experience of some sort. And even if you don't have domain experience, we have experiential level. So you could have been a homemaker and bringing up your children. You could have been a class teacher. You could have been a professor somewhere. Everybody has the ability to add value. So I think the first thing I want to say is SVP is not a corporate entity. It is actually a community entity. It's for everybody in the community. We get together as a group, we identify not-for-profits, then we choose to say which ones would we like to work with, which spaces do they work with, and then we have a few of our partners getting engaged with them for 3 years. So they work with them for 3 years in an engaged manner every month, reviewing how they're doing. Somebody might come up and say, I have a technology problem. Somebody may come up and have a fundraising problem. We will then lean on our other partners and get the resources together and help that not for profit. So we work as a community of givers who want to give as much of our time, much of our wisdom, much of our networks to these not for profits to scale, grow, and realize their aspirations. And I also want to call out something that SVP is not all about growth in our not-for-profit. Some of them may not want to grow, they may want to do better quality work, which is completely fine. So we are here to serve their aspirations. We don't put our aspirations on them uh, unless they want to go in that journey. So we're more advisory than as a donor. We've got the check, so you better listen to us. That's not the SVP model.
No, when I was thinking about, when I was reading up on your model, I was just wondering that the whole matching of demand supply when it comes to skill sets, advice, the needs, the city. I mean, that must be quite a task, right? Because you
It
really
is.
have to try and make this, happen across so many partners, so many places. So maybe if you could just, double down on that a little bit for us and just kind of tell us how you manage this.
So there are two things. The first thing is when a partner joins SVP, when an individual joins SVP, we first ask them to help us with a 20-minute to 1 hour conversation to say, what are your skill sets? Where do you feel you can add value? And where would you like to add value? So I might be a great financial services person, but I want to get involved in a different domain area. So you will find that we first do that conversation with the philanthropist. Okay. Then we catalog that information. And then as our NGOs ask for certain resources, within the chapter, we have CEOs who are full-time and who are very passionate individuals who are interested in the journey of our philanthropists would say, Govind, you're very good at this. This NGO needs this. You also want to contribute in this area. Would you mind giving an hour to them to help them with this thought process? So
Mhm.
what we've done is in every chapter, we have the skill sets of our partners, where they want to play, and we have the NGOs who have their needs, and then we try to match those. This is not easy, Vivek, because um, we also have to match the personalities, the styles, the behaviors of our partners. Not all of us are the same. So this is a challenging role which our CEOs play, and our CEOs do an outstanding job of making sure that the right partners are given the right kind of not-for-profits to work with. But it's done in a very thoughtful manner, and it's done keeping in mind the interests of the partners, because we are here for their journey. We are here to make them better philanthropists. That's the mission of SVP. Build lifelong givers of their time, of their wisdom, of their money for them to give.
I think your experience of 23 years at Egon Zender would really help you, especially do
Yes.
the matchmaking when it comes to the people, the
Yeah.
personality, because ultimately it's all about people being able to work together
Yeah.
towards a collective goal.
I agree with you. I agree with you. And it's a real joy for me to work with the diverse group of partners we have. While I didn't mention this upfront, I think SVP is a great place for me to grow old, because I have a community now of people that are all focused on one mission, which is how do we make the world a better place. And I think there's no
What a
question of
lovely
my
role
ever
to get up to
feeling,
every morning, too.
yeah,
Like,
yeah, and there's no question of me ever feeling bored that there's not enough work for me to do. So there's no retirement for me. Let's put it that way.
lovely. There's a question here from Viren. He's saying that what's a success story that you've witnessed where hands-on involvement beyond just financial support truly transformed the community? Anything that you'd like to share?
Many examples are hands-on support. Okay, let me give you an example of an organization that we worked with many, many years ago. which was actually taking individuals from a small village, bringing them into a city, and training them to be good nurses, good nursemaids, basically for hospitals. And the lady who was doing this all from her home. And two of our partners loved the model and said, here's livelihood being created for people who didn't have the opportunity. And they got together with them and then they helped them grow and scale and give them access to hospitals to get the employment as well, because employment is also important. You can provide them the skills, but if you don't provide employment. And what we did as SVP in that city and with that group of people was really expose them how they can look at some techniques and managerial techniques of getting the right people, preparing them for an interview, getting them to be interviewed, getting them to be skilled and then employed, and then ensuring that they have the right ecosystem around them to grow. Because a lot of them had never seen that kind of money. And I'm talking of 5,000, 8,000, 10,000 rupees a month. I'm not talking of large amounts. They've come from places where they had 1,000, 100 rupees, 500 rupees, 1,000 rupees a month. So how do they manage that money then? So a variety of different things our partners did in that journey, which is to help get more individuals to be skilled and capable of being employed, getting them employed, and then helping them post the employment. This was a very rewarding journey for my partners. I was not involved in that, but I've heard the story. And it was very rewarding for my partners to see the impact of the work they've done, which went from like 40 people to more than 1,000 people in a
Wow.
span of a few years. The numbers are not large, but I think the impact it had on those families was huge. Another example I can give you, which is, uh, in some ways close to home, where I've seen a change in community impact. So, a lot of people say, Vivek, that, you can give food to somebody and satisfy them, but if there's no derivative benefit beyond that, what's the theory of change? You are helping, like you take the midday meals that are done. There are many organizations that do that. Akshay Patra being one of them. The
Right.
midday meals actually is not about just food. It's actually about helping them focus, be better students, learn, and then do better in education. So the end impact of that midday meal is actually education and learning. In the same way, I've worked with a few NGOs where what we've done is changed communities. Where in a community of a village that I was part of near Bombay, um, girls were getting married. Women were getting married at 14 and 15, which was crazy. And they were having 3 children by 21, and one third of the children were dying in that village because of malnutrition. Through a not-for-profit, we got in there, and within a 3 year time frame, we had zero mortality rate. We had livelihoods being created there for the men to stay back and not go to the city. We had farming done, and all because we were able to provide better water resources to help them conserve water and dam water harvesting, which is retaining water. This kind of transformation transformed the community where it's now entirely led by women, the panchayat, the people there. So to me, SVP has got a unique ability because most of our capital is what we call patient capital. We give our grants for capacity building and for long-term impact. So
Right.
we do not fund, as far as we can, we do not fund projects for OPEX. We fund projects for long-term CapEx.
Right.
And therefore, our partners who are so generous with their capital allows people to really come in there and look at the long term versus the short.
I believe that's a major problem with some of the NGOs, right? Because a lot of the money that comes in is typically towards short-term projects, and they're always on the treadmill trying to raise the next round, trying to kind of keep the volunteers base intact, the partners intact, right? So, what are your thoughts on this? And do you see the trend changing now towards capacity building, strategic, long-term planning, or it still is?
Yes, I do see that changing. So I think, Vivek, the one biggest change that's happened in India in the last 5 to 8 years is the number of individuals that are contributing to the way forward with not-for-profits has gone up significantly.
Mhm.
So, the terminology that's used in the sector is HNIs or high net worth individuals. But effectively, it's individuals. Okay, I don't think they need to be high net worth. Any individual can give. And I
Right.
think a lot of individuals, when they give, they tend to make it more long-term driven. The CSR Act does call for clear understanding of what the projects are, utilization survey, etc. So I don't think the CSR grants can be necessarily used for capacity building. But I think with HNIs complementing the CSR grants, I think organizations can build capacity and deliver much more. 10 years ago, it was largely CSR money. It wasn't so much capacity building. So people used to keep their investment in their own growth very low. Today, I think I see organizations investing in their growth thanks to patient capital for people in the high net worth industry. Organizations like SVP, organizations that are run by foundations. I mean, I don't know whether it's a factual, the correct statement I'm making, but I'll make it out there. That today, the number of family foundations that have given money for philanthropy in the last 5 to 8 years, I believe, has more than quadrupled because wealth in India has also grown significantly over the last 10, 15 years. So there's a lot more generosity, there's a lot more giving forward, there's a lot more desire to bridge this inequality gap of have and have nots. So I think I do feel that the world is changing in India, and you will find a lot more patient capital coming into the country in the next 5 to 10 years, which can be used for capacity building, which can be used for investment in pilot projects, which can be used for growth.
You made an interesting point about the CSR requirement about determining what's the end use of the grant in that sense, right? Do you think that this is in some sense a little flawed? Because I know what the government's trying to do. It's trying to really be clear about the end use, rather than saying long term, because then there's no accountability in that, right? But do you think there's a mid path that can be found out here, or it will stay in the same way?
So I think at one level it's a good thing, Vivek, only because it makes us more accountable to impact. It makes us more accountable to outcomes. I think it's a good thing. It's not very different from the for-profit world where, when people give you money, they want to see a return on investment. I think the
Right,
difference here is I would like to look at social return, not financial return.
right,
So if as chair of a CSR committee, if I decide to give money to a not-for-profit and help them invest in the right things, I do want to see what the social return is. I do not need to see the financial return and measure every rupee or naya paise, but I do want to see that if I supported something that was helping in water harvestation or of a nature which is going to help water make a difference to the community's lives, I'd like to know what the impact is. Having said that, what I would love is if there was some way for CSRs to also provide some flexibility to build organizational muscle. Today, that is not as strong. And the best organizations in the world, whether you take it in the corporate world, many in India, many around the world, are built by investment in people, are built by investment in infrastructure. The not-for-profit world is starved of resources, Vivek. Unfortunately, it's not like the for-profit world where you can invest ahead of the curve. They have to
right.
invest as they go along. And therefore, I'd love it if there was some way that the CSR Act could provide for some capacity building in some ways.
Right.
But do I believe it should be changed completely? No, I don't.
By the way, Govind, the chat has been run over. I don't know if I could do justice. You were saying that I don't know what the people are going to be here for, but you can see the interest out here. So I'm going to try my best to try and integrate 2, 3 questions and try and get out there. But just to kind of Gayatri is saying that for people without big network or resources, and you talked about that briefly when you said there are no HNIs. It's about individuals. That's really important, right? What are some small practical ways they can get involved in engage philanthropy? I mean, what's a good starting point for them to do that?
So I don't think you need network and too many resources. SVP is a great platform for those who want to get engaged in philanthropy.
So
Um,
you can just kind of come on SVP and offer your
Yeah, so
services, register your support.
most of our partners typically join SVP and come and check out how they can make a difference. Our model is very simple. Every partner, every individual comes in with a 3 lakh contribution annually. We take that
Mhm.
3 lakh, we pool it together in a chapter or in a city, and then we look at giving that as grants to our not-for-profits. Okay. Um, if, however, the person doesn't feel they have the 3 lakhs or maybe don't have the ability to give it at this stage, they can join as volunteers in many movements around India. And if they just go and check out the volunteering movements in the country, they can easily give 8 hours, 10 hours, 20 hours a month, whatever they think is right. What I would encourage people to do is form communities, not try to do everything on your own, but leverage the goodwill of people around you. So even if there are 10 friends that want to get together and work with two not-for-profits that they know in their community, in their city, in their area, do it together. Because I think learning from each other is equally important as learning with the NGO. And one of the points you had asked me a little while ago, is, what have I learned in philanthropy is really to be humble and be prepared to unlearn. People like me come in with fixed mindsets from the corporate world, and I think it's very important to unlearn before we can contribute to the not-for-profit ecosystem, because it's a very different ecosystem. It's a very different journey of life. And if I try to apply my same principles of the profit world, I won't succeed. If I apply some of my disciplines of the corporate world, I might succeed. But the principles of growth, principles of scale, principles of making money, I'm not sure they fully apply to the ecosystem. But the principles of skill sets that I acquire could apply. So as long as I'm applying the practices of the for-profit world, but the skills and the disciplines of the for-profit world, I think I'd be okay.
There are a lot of questions, but I'll just jump to this one. There's an interesting point that you made about really applying your discipline and skills and not really, running it literally in that sense, right? But, how do you really define success, in your way? Because end of the day, when you're looking at net outcomes, do you try to always put it down to a measurable, thing, or that you kind of leave it to subjectivity also? I mean, must be a very difficult when you're trying to do social change versus obviously, simple economic change, right?
So I'll give you an answer for me,
And
and then
maybe
I'll
you
give you
can
an
have some
answer.
other nuance on that, because obviously you live this world. Would love you to just kind of dwell on this point for us to really understand
So
this.
I'll give you how I look at success for myself as somebody who's been a philanthropist or who's been in the social ecosystem. I'll give you how I feel many others look at it. Okay. For me, success is if I, as an individual, have learned something new, and if I have developed myself better. So if my journey of life has, and that check writing doesn't give me that. So to answer your question, uh, I love to get engaged with others, with other philanthropists, with other donors, with other individuals in the ecosystem. So it doesn't need to be only with NGOs. I think being with a bunch of donors and learning from them how they do things gets me very enriched. So I
All the
think,
stakeholders.
yeah, yeah, all the stakeholders. So for me, success is am I growing? Am I learning? The second degree of success is the not-for-profits that I work with or the organizations I work with. Are they seeing them realize their mission, whatever that may be? So their mission, their purpose, is that being realized, and does that give me joy? Um, if they're not succeeding, I think I've not been a great philanthropist. So those are my two metrics, two measures. Do I have metrics? Yes, I do. The metrics are, I like to be a multiplier. So if a person comes to me and says, Govind, I'd like your financial support and your time, I'll say, I'll give you my time unconditionally, but I will give you my financial support if you raise an equal amount that I'm getting. So you go out and raise it, you're going to get matched. So what I'm trying to get at is I want them to learn how to fish, if I to use that term. So I don't want to give them everything upfront. I want to give them an ability to learn their own capacity building before they come to me. But I said, you've got a backstop with me, so go ahead and try. To me,
Right.
that gives me a lot of reward. And I think that's helped a lot of organizations build their capabilities. There's a program we run at SVP called Fast Pitch, which
Right.
allows individuals to build a skill of telling their story in 5 minutes, which is not easy. If you ask
Right.
me to tell you my story in 5 minutes, I'll find it very challenging, right? But we train them over 2 months or 3 months to get the message right, to get the narrative right. And I know many individuals in the not-for-profit ecosystem who've been through this, about 36 of them now, but I've spoken to quite a few of them. And they've said this has been an invaluable lifelong skill that they've learned. Because now when they go to donors, they're able to get their message across. When they're interviewing people, they're able to get their message across. When they're talking to other not-for-profits to collaborate, they're able to get their message across. So I believe it's this that is success, Vivek. And you'll turn around and say, Go, this is all loosey-goosey. This is not tangible. It's not tangible.
Right.
So in the not-for-profit ecosystem, I'm very happy to live with ambiguity because there has to be a belief system that this is working.
I think the power of the elevator pitch can never be underestimated, right? In that
Yeah.
sense. Yeah. To your point again, the Sakshi is asking that what are some of the qualities that you look for in an NGO when you're deciding to offer support or investment? You talked earlier about doing those interviews, discussing with people. I'm sure you're kind of trying to get a feel of really of the people out there and the mission that they are on. What is the criteria that you typically, kind of look at?
I think the most important criteria that I look at is learning ability. And this goes back to my Egon Zehnder days. When I used to look at individuals that I would say are exceptional, it would be those that are constantly in a learning journey. that are prepared to learn from others and realize that, you know, all that they get is from others. So I'd say first is an NGO that is desirous of learning and NGO leader, and whether they are prepared to accept that SVP is here with their money, but they also come with the baggage of people, baggage of partners. If I find an NGO believes that the only capital is the only reason for coming to SVP, it's probably not the right fit. As an individual philanthropist, I have the good fortune of supporting a lot of NGOs outside of SVP. I just look at the skill sets of the leaders and whether they're prepared to learn. I look at how sticky are their funders. Have they built relationships with their funders where they funded them for 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, or do we have a revolving door every year, which tells me that either they've not gone back to their earlier funder or the earlier funder doesn't want to support them for whatever reasons, right? That is a yardstick for me to say how good are they at really building relationships for the long run. So those would be the few criteria I would use, Vivek.
To your point earlier when you talked about the fact that it's always about measuring in terms of how much have you learned from them. There's an interesting question here from Shan. He says, in what ways has working closely with NGOs and communities challenge or change your own perspective on social issues? You probably went in with the preconceived notion, and then you, after engaging with, you just come out.
Oh, Shan, what a fabulous question. I mean, I'll tell you, the person I am today is very different from the person I was 12 years ago.
Right.
As an individual, I've repurposed so many of my thoughts, my own myths, my own beliefs, and a lot of them are around the fact that I didn't have the exposure, I didn't have the knowledge, I didn't have the wisdom of many things that are happening in our country. I think the humility that it's taught me that I do believe I'm living in a bit of an ivory tower, and I once in a while need to go to the grassroots, has really changed me as a person. So I can only say that, and I can speak for many of my friends who've been part of this journey over the last many years, and many of them feel that being with being with the ecosystem, the social sector, has allowed them to realize how privileged we are, how blessed we are as individuals, and how it's so easy to be on the other side any day tomorrow, right? And our next rebirth, whenever it happens. So the more we can realize that it's not about we have more than them, they have more than us in many ways. They have the tenacity to live the life they do. They have the ability to manage with resources that are far leaner than ours. So by, as I say, by giving doesn't give me any joy. By investing in them for their forward journey gives me a lot more joy.
And there's an interesting question here from Arnav. He says, when it comes to capacity building, long-term thinking, what's a common myth or misunderstanding that you wish more people knew the truth about? Be it the NGOs, be it the corporates which are investing. I mean, any thoughts on that?
Can you just repeat that? Don't think I fully captured it.
When it comes to capacity building, what's a
Mm,
common myth or misunderstanding that you wish more people knew the truth about?
great question. So I think when you say the word capacity building, it means that the organization by definition is deficient. Um, I think that's a myth. They just, for their journey forward, they need to build greater capacity versus saying that they are actually don't have it today and therefore they are deficient. So if you approach it with a negative mindset, to say, I'm going to come to this organization because they're not doing things well and I'm going to help them get better, I think that's being a very black hat approach. I would prefer to look at the glass half full and say, how do I make it fuller versus half empty? And when many of us, including myself, when we start working with a not for profit, we believe we can help them do it better, I think we've got a wrong path because we haven't done it. I mean, if you ask me to run any not for profit in this country at the grassroots, I will be a complete failure because I don't understand the ecosystem so well. I don't know how to get things executed. And so I get inspired by individuals who do that. And the day I turn around and say they don't know it as well as I do, I fail. So capacity building, the way they want to build capacity is more important than the way I want to build capacity. So sometimes the myth is, I'm going to give this money for capacity building, go and build uh, you know, build a building or go and hire 4 people. And the first question I would ask them is, are you supporting them for the next 10 years? And no, I'm giving the money this year. Now, what if they build the capacity and there's nowhere to support them for the next year?
Right.
So, one of the things that I worry about is when we as SVP do a lot of fundraising activities, or when I give money in my own personal capacity to NGOs, I worry that they'll use that money very well to build a bit of a ecosystem, but then next year they don't have the money. And then what happens to that ecosystem? So, unlike the corporate world where you invest and you know that you can get returns from your cash flow to fund your next year, or you can go out and get debt or you can get equity. Here, donations don't necessarily are perpetual in nature. So, to my mind, Vivek, capacity building has to be measured with what you have to build the capacity for the year and also the future years. And one of the things I worry about sometimes with NGOs is that they raise a lot of money this year. So they build the capacity for future growth, and then next year they don't get the money, and then they have to pull back. And I therefore think doing a measured 2 or 3 year journey is much more important than trying to put all your eggs in this basket today.
So I think really focusing on sustainability and ensuring it kind of
That's right.
lasts is probably the
That's
most
right.
important thing.
That's most important. Yeah. Very
You
well
know,
put.
yeah. So just segueing into another area, we've talked a lot about the positives and the benefits of obviously giving, about engage philanthropy. But sometimes NGOs, social initiatives, they sometimes attract. I mean, often they kind of attract criticism from various quarters. I mean,
Yes.
sometimes it is maybe just your donors, but sometimes it could be the local politicians, the local ecosystem, and some of them just end up being a marked target. I mean, even Bill Gates, for all the billions that he's put in, I mean, there are ridiculous conspiracy theories around him. So how does it feel, kind of facing criticism when you know that you're really trying to make a positive impact in the world, right? So how do you deal with that?
Vivek, I think I feel bad, but I feel even more bad for the people who are doing the work at the ground level.
Mm,
Um, like in any ecosystem, there's always going to be goods, not so good, and bads.
mm,
But to brandish the entire sector as being bad, as not knowing what they're doing, is a very false statement, because I can tell you a lot of the last mile engagement with the community only happens through the not for profit ecosystem in a big way. I think the government plays a huge role in a lot of enabling the social sector, but they don't necessarily get involved as much in the last mile as this sector gets involved in, the NGOs. And I therefore think there's a sort of a combination of forces that need to work on this together, or whether it's the private sector, whether it's the public sector, and the not-for-profit social sector. Let me give you an example, just to be brutally honest about this issue. There's an accountability issue. Are they accountable to their funds? What's their overheads? I get to ask this question all the time. What's the admin ratio? Okay, and I ask them a question. A lot of my friends who ask me this, whom I have the ability to ask a direct question, is, do you ask that question of a mutual fund that you invest your money in? Why are they spending 1.78% on expenses and not 1.75, which another mutual fund is spending? You don't choose to then invest in one versus the other. Here you're prepared to ask these questions because they're also prepared to give you the answers. And because they're so cash starved that they're prepared to bend backwards to accommodate your interest. I've known of NGOs where they say the donor wants me to do this, but it's not mission aligned, but I'll do it because I need the money so that I can support 4 people's jobs. It's a very unfair way of doing it, right? If tomorrow, a large company like X, Y, or Z that was making outstanding products ran into a cash crunch, and a bank told them, I'll give you the money, but you've got to stop doing what you're doing and do something else. Will they change that way? I don't think they will. They'll go to another bank. They'll go to another bank, right? So my point is, in the social ecosystem, we question a lot more than we listen or understand. And if there's a way to understand what they do before you question, I think it'll be a big difference in the sector. Are there people that I would be hesitant to fund? Yes, there are, but just that's like in the corporate world. There are many organizations I would not put my money behind, and I'm not saying they're right or wrong. It's just my value system. So I think it's a sector that needs a lot of understanding and a lot of storytelling and a lot of narratives, and I think we've got to get a lot more out there.
I can see a lot of parallels between what you're talking about and the startup space, because
Yes,
sometimes our
yes,
VC saying, I'll invest, but you got to change your business model. Sometimes
yeah.
people do, sometimes they don't, and so on and so forth, right? But I hear you on this. And, there's an interesting take here from Vardha. She's saying, my question to you is, how do you keep the spirit of giving alive in the long run, especially in today's fast-paced world? And I just want to add to that, I can imagine working on truly long-term strategic social change can be very, very exhausting, I know, and can be emotionally taxing, right? So how do you really stay resilient? How do you kind of, work through it all? And what's advice that you would give to other people who probably are, also probably mentally exhausted, right? Trying to make this big difference.
So I think patience and tenacity are very, very critical. And I think um, systemic change, social change takes a long time. And I think you just need to work on it literally a drop at a time. I think if you try to be too ambitious, don't get the success, you get depressed or you feel unhappy. So I would just say that don't underestimate the fact that in the social sector and in the not-for-profit ecosystem, driving change is not easy and it's challenging, and you've got to give yourself time. So my only request is don't try to run the sprint. Be more of a
Right.
marathon player. Try and get patient capital for a period of time. I would love it if there are donors on this call who recognize, try to avoid 1 year donations. It's definitely beneficial. But if you have the ability to give the same organization for 2 or 3 years, you'll be building greater sustainability and stability in the organization. So if you have that quantum of money, instead of dispersing it every year to different organizations, try to give the same organ if they need it and if they can use it well.
Just shifting gears again, I know you have a hard stop at 6. So, some reflections from you. Philanthropy, they say, often changes the person giving as much as the recipient, right?
I think it's
I-
more. It's
it's
more the
more.
person giving. It's
Right.
not the recipient is doing amazing work, and the giving helps them do their work better.
Right.
But I think the recipient is the one who is devoid of knowledge on the ground, who actually gets transformed by the giving process. And especially when you're giving forward, when you're giving towards seeing a journey that's evolving, when you see happiness in the children that you've supported, or you see happiness in the transformation of the lives that you've given, I think there's lot more that the giver gets than
Any
the
specific
donor gets.
moments that come to your mind? Any specific incident that really, you kind of, when you look back for 15 years, you say, oh my God. Uh,
Yeah, I'll give you a more recent one. Now, there are many moments, but I'll give you one that's more recent. There's an organization that's doing some amazing work with thalassemia children,
mhm.
children helping them in thalassemia and cancer care, etc. And I remember getting a call from the founder in early July last year saying, when two donors had committed to me and they've had a process issue and they're going to get delayed. And I have no money in the bank to pay my staff this month. But more importantly, I've got 60 children and I don't have enough supplies for them to manage it, right? Without thinking a minute, I just said, here's a certain amount of money that will tide you over the next 2 months. Your donors will come through later. Go ahead and just don't think twice. That organization was devoid of funds that month. Today, that's over 2 crores in what they've raised in the last 12 months. They're
Wow.
self-sustaining long term. They're self-funded, and they know their journey over the next 2 years is going to be better. Now, it's not the money that gave me gratification. It's the fact that that person reached out to me. The fact that they could trust me with that information, and it's an SVP NGO. And
Mhm.
I just felt a tremendous sense of joy, not because of the money I gave them, but because of what they're doing today. That has helped them get a different purpose in their life and said, now we'll never want to be in that situation again. So we're going to build a corpus, we're going to get there, right? And so it takes a lot for that person to call up and ask for that. So I think all I would say, Vivek, is it's not the act of giving that's important. It's the act of receiving that's important. And the person should be prepared to receive it well with the right intent and the right desire to make a difference.
That's a lovely perspective, Govind. And other thought. I mean, I'm sure that as the person that you are, and you're so active in this field, I'm sure you must be trying to encourage friends, family members, people that you meet. You must be talking about this, right? I mean, how do you typically go about encouraging them to kind of get into philanthropy? Do you kind of ask them to do volunteering, or do you just kind of tell them to maybe just write a small, start with a small check and think about it? I mean, what's the best way to
On a
initiate
lighter
people to
note, Vivek, many people are keeping away from me because the moment they meet me, I get them into philanthropy. So I'm
well, I
waiting for
meant
the
that,
day.
but I'm just
I'm waiting for the day when somebody turns around and says, you can't fly because the passengers next to you don't want you to sit next to you. So no, but I do believe the right people get involved at the right time. I think it's a matter of having conversations. There are many of my friends that I've been talking to for many years, and they pick the right time. I don't believe cajoling people to do something is the right approach. Giving them an exposure is clearly a gift. if I can give them an exposure to many things, if many of us can give them exposure to many things, I think that's a gift. Beyond that, what they do with that gift, whether they use it to get more gifts, whether they use it to do more with their lives, it's really a personal choice.
Right.
So I think as an ecosystem, we must encourage individuals. So I'll give you a context of Dan Utsav. Dan Utsav is a week of joy of giving, which is in October 2nd to 9th of every week, every year, I'm sorry. And I have a friend, Vengat Krishnan, who's a big inspirer to me in terms of philanthropy, big inspiration. And he started this movement years ago. And what's very, very joyful for me is to see the kind of volunteering that happens during the week by employees of organizations, by families, by people on the streets, by individuals from shops who wanted, shop owners who want to do things that week to give people. And to me, that's a movement, Vivek. That's no one person doing it. It's the entire country doing it. It's the entire ecosystem that's doing it. I just think if joy of giving is 365 days a year, it'll be lovely. But it's nice that it's a week where we at least create and cultivate that volunteering and that giving feeling.
Govind, as before we kind of close this, just a few questions, like a rapid fire, put together by my team. So I'm just going to, just, kind of fire them at you. So first thing, morning person or evening person, night person?
Oh, night. I sleep very late.
Okay. That sounds like me. Work from home or office?
Office, any day. Culture. All because of culture. Be
Absolutely.
working with people and being with people. It's probably not as effective. I know productivity goes down because of travel time and all that, but I just think that I learn and grow from others.
Book that's really changed your life.
Stephen
Or
Covey's
books.
Seven Habits. Stephen Covey's Seven Habits.
I can see discipline is a very important part of what you do. I mean, I think it kind of keeps
Yeah.
coming back. That that's an amazing book, right? If you could have dinner with any historical figure, who would that be?
Historical figure, Mahatma Gandhi.
If you could give your younger self one piece of advice, what would that be?
Start doing what I do. What I started doing at 50, start at 30.
I somehow thought that would be the answer. What's the one word that best describes your approach to philanthropy?
I think the one word that makes me feel is humility. Being humble, recognizing that it's not about being superior to others, it's about being equal with others. It's just that they have something that you may have differently. So never feel that you are one step ahead of others or one step above others.
And if you could solve one social issue instantly, uh, just wave the white magic wand and get it solved, which one would that be?
Oh God, that's a tough one. Yeah.
I
There's
can
so
imagine.
many social issues. Let's say the behavior towards women. I think the patriarchy of this world, and I think a lot of it has to do with men. It's not about the women. I think all over the world, I think it's it's just I think there's so much creativity, so much beauty, so much diversity that women can bring into our lives. But I'm not sure we as men allow it as much.
Lovely. I think all the female audience out there would love you for that. I mean, and I think there's a big issue, and
I think
especially,
a lot of it has to do with us. Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. Uh, I think Govind, before you go, any closing thoughts for our audience out here?
I think I don't know who's in the audience, but I would only recognize one thing, which is to just say, let's live every life a day at a time, be blessed by what we've got, and don't ever have something that you've not done as a regret. We will all leave this world without any doubt. I don't think any of us is immortal to last till 200. So let's be happy with our lives. Let's also continue to make other people happy around us. Giving, saying thank you, being happy, being appreciative, being grateful to others, and giving more of our time, more of our wisdom, more of our money to others doesn't make us lesser. It makes us richer. So that's my only comment.
That's a lovely parting thought, Govind. Govind, it was awesome just having you over. I think the hour just flew by. I didn't even realize. And I mean, wish you, Godspeed, all the power, all the luck to you to kind of, continue to make this, lovely things happen in the world around us. Thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you, Vivek, for having me, and thank you for listening to my views. Thank you.
Yeah. Pleasure having you over. Have a good one.